everybody, this is Aaron here from Missio Discipleship. I'm in the car at the moment. It's a little bit rainy, so you might hear a little bit of sound, but I'm sure you guys are used to that already. What I want to do is I want to start part 2 of how to study the Bible. I want to give you 2 more steps today. Now, have you ever noticed that when you are in a plane, by the way, I hate flying. My wife knows this. I'll tell you a quick story. When I was going to Sydney, I believe last year, maybe even earlier this year. Anyway, I was flying. I thought it would be a good idea to kind of take my mind off of the takeoff because it's the worst part for me. I get super jittery. And anyway, my wife was watching this movie and she was cracking up. And she thought it was really, really funny. And then, in fact, she had kind of like tears of laughter, and her eyes were kind of welling up with tears. It was very funny. When I look back on it, at that time, I couldn't watch with her, and I didn't see what was so funny because I thought my life was in jeopardy, and I thought I was never going to live. And the last thing that I would be seeing was my wife cracking up laughing. Anyway, that's my own little thing, but I decided that I was going to watch a different movie. And this movie, by the way, I don't recommend it, and I didn't realize at the time it was just kind of what was on, and forgive me because I was just an emotional wreck. But I watched Deadpool, and really what I did is I just watched the first kind of like 3 minutes, because in that 3 minutes it was the scariest 3 minutes of my life. It was the most high action kind of impact. You know, there was guns and there was cars flipping and just crashing and people were dying left, right and center. And it just was not adding to the situation. It's very funny now that I look back on it. And I didn't, for all of you guys who are judging me right now, it's okay. Don't worry, my salvation is still intact. And I didn't watch the whole thing anyway. But have you ever, like, when I get up in the sky, right, I really appreciate the view. I really, really love the view. It's when you're ascended, you're about 30,000 feet up. It's real cool. And it's cool coming down too. I just really hate the turbulence. I hate the idea of kind of crashing and all that. Thing is, the point that I'm trying to get to is that at 30,000 feet, you get this whole view. You get this view that is completely different, right? When I'm on the ground, I'm seeing details. I'm seeing little, bits of grass. I'm seeing leaves. I'm seeing animals. I'm seeing all of this kind of stuff. I've got human interaction, peer-to-peer stuff. We've got relationships happening. We've got all of this different stuff that we see while we're on the ground level. However, if you ascend to 30,000 feet, you get a completely different view of things. Well, basically that's what we want to do at the start of any kind of Bible study or devotional time. Okay, so we want to start at a 30,000 feet ascended view, so that what we're doing is we're actually looking from a holistic view before we dive down deep into the details. Okay, so before you get down into the nuts and bolts and the nitty-gritty groundwork of the Bible, and until you get down into the verses and the words of those verses, what you need to do is you need to ascend a little bit, kind of get the broader picture of that 30,000 feet view. And then from there, once you've got those details, the broader picture, then you descend down. So what I'm trying to say here is what you need to do is basically you need to understand first and foremost, you need to choose your book. You need to understand the book from a holistic level. You need to understand how it works as a whole before you descend down into its verses. Don't just cherry pick verses that you like from the text, because the thing is if you do that, it'll be counter to what God is probably saying. For example, and I know a lot of people do this, and it's okay. If Philippians 4:13 is your life verse, then forgive me. But Philippians 4:13, forgive me, Stephen Curry, love you, do some awesome work. But if Philippians 4:13 was about basketball, and Jesus giving you all strength to play basketball would be the best you that you could be, then that would be a good application of Philippians 4:13, but it's not, right? The whole idea of Philippians 4:13 is that you would be, whether you have much or have little, you would be absolutely content because Christ is all you need, and Christ gives you strength. Right? So that's the context. And if you understand a little bit about the author, you'd find out that Paul was writing that from a Roman imprisonment. Right? He was writing that from a Roman imprisonment, and the church of Philippi was birthed out of prison. And so you know that with this group of people, both Paul and the people that have kind of come out and are part of the Philippian church, they know what hardship is. All right. If you go look at Acts chapter 16, they know what hardship is because that's where the church was birthed out of. It was birthed out of a Philippian jail cell. So when he says, I know what it's like to have much and I know what it's like to have little, right? And I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. What he's actually saying is, whether I have nothing, I always fully have Jesus, right? Whether I have everything, it doesn't matter because my everything is Jesus. So if I have a lot or I have nothing, I still have Jesus. That's what he's saying. And Jesus gives me strength, right? So what you need to understand is the 30,000 foot view before you descend down into the details. So that's a little bit of advice. Now, I want to just do a recap of what we talked about on our last session. So our last session, we covered 2 points. The first point that we covered was choose a book, okay? Because many Christians kind of just open up their Bible and think that if they just kind of put their finger somewhere, that's what God wants for them for that day. And I disagree, okay, for various reasons. Choose a book. Start at one place and go to the end. Why? Because that's what the author intended. Imagine if you were writing a letter to a loved one, you would start at the beginning and you would work your way to the end. So imagine if they were reading it, they wouldn't read it from the middle, right? They'll start at the beginning and they'll work their way to the end. So in the same way, choose a book, start from the beginning, work your way to the end. The second point that I said was read. Read, okay? It's kind of nonsensical, but a lot of people don't read, right? Because they're used to cherry picking and that's fine. It's not from here on forward. That's not going to be fine. But read the book. Read the book 4 or 5 times. You want to kind of actively listen to the book. Actively listen to what God is writing within that, what the author is penning in that, what the recipients would hear from that. You want to be asking a few questions: who, what, why, how, when, where. All right. Then you want to summarize, and this is going to lead us into our third point today. Then you want to summarize. What are you going to summarize? Essentially, you're going to summarize this one thing. What did the author mean? And how you're going to do that is real simple. It's a cool little task if you want to boil down a lot of information very, very quickly. And it's this: if I was to boil all of that content into one sentence or a few words, what was the author trying to say? Cool? Now, on the flip side, you want to be saying this and asking this question: if I was to boil it down to one sentence or a few words, what would the hearers be learning for the first time? What would the hearers be learning for the first time? Cool? Now, if you get that, that's going to lead us into our third point for today, which is this: understand the main theme and how the various chapters are connecting to that thought. Okay, so let me kind of illustrate this. If I'm having a conversation with somebody, I might be trying to communicate one thing, but it might come out in different ways, and it might have modifiers to that thought. So for example, in Ephesians, Paul has one thing. He wants to strengthen and encourage the believers in Christ, and he wants to do this in various ways. And this is just an example. And by the way, you know that I'm driving. That's how we do. But he wants to do this in a few ways. He wants to remind them of the spiritual blessings that they have in Christ. He wants to remind them that it was faith that got them in, but it was works that are going to point back to Jesus after the fact, right? The third thing is he wants to remind them about the gospel. The fourth thing is he wants to remind them about how a Christian ought to live in light of what God has given them in a practical sense. And then the fifth thing is, how does that look in various relationships, be it marriage, be it parent-child, be it kind of master-slave, boss-employee. And then the last thing is, what does it look like to be strengthened in the sense of spiritual warfare. Cool? So there was one theme, and there were various thoughts that kind of modified that one theme. So what you want to do is, now that you're reading, now that you've selected your book, you want to go through and you want to summarize what is the theme that the author is trying to communicate, and how do the different chapters and breakups modify and add to that one thought or that one theme. All right, cool. Well, that's your third option. And your fourth one, let me think for 1 second, because I've kind of, and your fourth one is, once you've got that information, okay, once you've got that information, now what I want you to do is some research, okay? And people get scared at this point because they go, research, biblical research, that's for the theologians. Well, it's not. I want to debunk that. And there's so many tools out there to put the everyday Christian in the place of the theologian. And to be honest, if you're a Christian, you're a theologian. There is no distinction, right? Why? Because theology is the study of God. The Bible is the revelation of God. And if you're studying the Bible, you're studying God. So therefore, if you're a Christian, you're a theologian. But here's the thing. There are various people who are gifted and have been gifted to the body that just have resource after resource that have done all of the hard work for you. What you just need to do is kind of get clued up, right? So half of the problem is knowing where to start. So here's the thing. I've only got a couple of minutes left on my battery. Here's the thing. What you want to do is do some research. So these are the things that you want to figure out. You figured out already who the writer is, who the intended audiences, but what I want you to do is do some back-end study. What's the cultural context? What's the historical context of the book? What was the origin and the purpose for writing that book? You've already discovered what the theme is. I want you to double check what that is. And what else would there be? Here's the thing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just speed this up. I'm going to fast forward a little bit, because I know that these resources that I'm going to give you, they have those answers. Here's the thing. I want you to do some research. Here's how you do research. Number one, you get a Bible study, a study Bible. Get a study Bible. All right. A study Bible has the breakups. It has the concordances. It has the kind of little intros into every book. It's got all the necessary information for you to kind of build a framework for that book that you're about to read, and usually has an outline as well. All right, so it gives you a lot of what we're telling you to do for yourself. So you can either get it from there or confirm the work that you've already done from there. The second resource that I want you to get is eSword. eSword. Why? Because you've got various commentaries, and they're free on there, and it's just such a good resource. But I want you to use it because on there you can get Bible dictionaries, concordances, you can look at things like the Greek and the Hebrew. We'll talk about that a little bit later. You can kind of access the minds of various commentators throughout history, which is real cool. And there's different layers of kind of the levels of commentary. So there's kind of like summary commentary, there's very, very detailed commentary, and you get to choose, and you kind of get to kind of pick the minds of these different authors. Now the third one, which is like my favorite, and it's my go-to when I need something very, very quick, and props to these guys, they're doing a really good job. If you can, support them. They are gotquestions.org. gotquestions.org. What they've done is they've built up a website which is purposely designed to answer Christians' questions, and they have a lot of Old Testament, New Testament survey in there. They've got individual books. They've got various questions that Christians ask. I love that resource. It's gotquestions.org. Okay, so let me just highlight what we've talked about today. From our first session, we said choose a book. Second session, what we've said is read the book, read it various times, and read actively. Start to summarize the author's intent and the recipients, what they would be hearing and learning for the first time. Then kind of expand that into a working theme. What is the overall theme of the book, and how do the various chapters modify that theme? Okay, and the last one is do some research, and I gave you 3 tools to utilize when doing this research. The first one is a study Bible. Cool? You can pick one up from your local bookstore, local Christian bookstore, or online. The second thing that you can do is download eSword. It gives you access to the minds of various authors and commentators throughout history. And the third thing that I want you to do is access the minds of the staff at gotquestions.org. They do such a good job, and they've got all of this built out. The cool thing with them is they do kind of like one-page snippets, so you get deep content in a short kind of paragraph, or a couple of paragraphs. Really, really cool. Anyway, that's my tips for today. How to Bible Study Part 2. Boom. If you're also looking at more of this stuff in the future, Missio Discipleship is currently building its own discipleship platform where we will be launching our Bible study method called the Taking Root Method, and more about that in future episodes. I'll leave you there. That's my time. It's great to have you listening. Blessings to you. Alrighty. Ba-boom. That's us.